Good morning, fourth Sunday of Lent, and we read the Gospel of John. Just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up, that everyone who believes may have eternal life in him. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. Whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe stands condemned already, because they have not believed in the name of God's one and only Son. This is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but people loved darkness instead of light, because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light, and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light, so that it may be seen plainly that what they have done has been done in the sight of God. There is something more important than what we see, and is how we look, because the way we look affects what we can see. I can go to visit the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona and see only stones, or I can visit it as Etsuro Soto did. Etsuro Soto is a 71-year-old Japanese sculptor. He was an art professor at Kyoto University in Japan when he decided to travel around Europe. In 1978, he visited Barcelona and was so impressed by the Sagrada Familia that he applied to work as a stonemason. Since then, he has been working on the Basilica following the instructions left by Antoni Gaudí. Etsuro has become chief sculptor of the temple, and he has already made more than 500 sculptures for that church. He came from a cultural and religious tradition very different from the European one. He was not Catholic, and it was difficult for him to connect with the project in a faithful way to Gaudí's spirit. When he learned the true intention of the author of the Sagrada Familia, he finally understood his work, and Etsuro Soto changed his life. He converted to Catholicism in 1989. Etsuro states, "A great work of art like the Sagrada Familia cannot be understood without glimpsing the direction that its creator wanted to give it. Now I have understood that I should not look at Gaudí, but towards what he was looking." The Japanese architect did not change his technique, he changed his way of looking at things, and his life changed completely. The story of his conversion is a very concrete example of what Jesus says to Nicodemus in the Gospel. As Moses lifted up the serpent in the desert, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him may have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Faith consists in seeing life differently. Who was Nicodemus? Nicodemus was a well-known and respected Pharisee in Judea, a prominent man and member of the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was an assembly of 71 wise men who acted as judges of Israel. They had great political and social influence. They were very concerned about their social status and society's opinion about them. Well, within this select group of Jews, Nicodemus was one of its greatest intellectual members. Nicodemus had heard and possibly witnessed the deeds that Jesus performed, and he was convinced that only God could perform such deeds. But the Jewish belief in a unique God made it impossible to accept that Jesus was God. His soul was in a dilemma, and he had to solve it. Two forces were struggling within him. On the one hand, like any Pharisee, he was very concerned about his social reputation. On the other hand, he was a sincere, good-hearted man who was seeking the truth in his life. It is therefore understandable that he wanted to meet Jesus for a serene dialogue, but that he had to do so at night, without being seen. What does Jesus mean by, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him may have eternal life? According to the book of Numbers in the Old Testament, the people of Israel began to murmur against God and Moses because of the difficulties they were facing in the wilderness. We are around 1200 BC, after the Exodus from Egypt. They didn't understand why God had taken them out of the land of Ramses II and led them into the desert to starve. Then poisonous snakes appeared and began to cause many deaths among them. Desperate, the Israelites cried out to Moses for help, and God gave him an unusual solution: to build a bronze serpent and lift it up on a pole. Anyone who looked at the bronze serpent could be healed and live. Jesus refers that when he will be lifted up and placed on high like the serpent, in other words, crucified, anyone who looks at him with faith and understands why and for what purpose Jesus is on the cross will see his life from a new perspective, the perspective of eternal life. He will discover that God is love. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. God didn't send his only Son into the world to judge the world, but to save the world. The word faith in Hebrew is much deeper than a simple intellectual adherence to ideas. Faith in Hebrew is emunah, which means truth, faithfulness, persistence, steadiness, something you can rely on with absolute certainty. To have faith, therefore, is not to accept some ideas. It's to trust in the person who is the source of those ideas. It is to know that we can lean on Jesus because he, by giving his own life, has given us eternal life. Jesus doesn't point at us an accusing finger, but embraces us with open arms. Christianity is not the cult of the cross, but the cult of God's embrace that we see in that cross. There is something more important than what we see, and it's the way we look. Let us look in the right direction to see God's love in our life. And God bless you.